Thank you to the Photo Society for having me tonight. I'm really excited to talk to everyone. My name is Ryan Bangdia, and I really like making photographs. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about how I do that and why I do it in the way that I choose to. So jumping right in, a little bit of an outline for what I hope to cover tonight. Gonna do a little introduction. I've met a couple of you, but would like to introduce myself to the rest of the people attending, and then I'm going to talk about my process, my inspiration, the materials, which are very important because uh, none of the work that I do is digitally oriented. It's all traditional film and darkroom printing, and then we'll conclude and have time for discussion and questions if there are any. Um, Something that I like to make a note of is I absolutely love that we are able to do this on a virtual platform. I think that it is such a boon of accessibility and reach for people who can't attend in person. And those are all good things, but I also have to acknowledge that um, all of the work that I do is on medium format film, and the negatives are pretty big. And when I make a presentation like this, the compression is not the greatest, right? And so it's wonderful to present it this way, but all of the things that I shoot with the intention of printing them and holding them in my hand. So hopefully that resonates with some of you. And um, yeah, it's kind of like the catch 22 of the work that I like to do. So um, for instance, these are some of my favorite prints that I have in my own home, and it's really hard to convey the size. These are 20-inch by 20-inch prints, and there's so much detail that is really hard to convey through the screen, but I hope that I can uh, share that with you tonight. So you'll have to forgive me. This is the third presentation I've given today. None of the other two had anything to do with this. So lot of slides on my mind, but a little bit about me. So I said my name is Ryan, and um, I moved to Philly a year ago, almost exactly, just last end of last May. My partner is a resident at Jefferson, and I, until recently, was remote, but my office is now just over by Independence, so that's not such a bad commute. But I really like Philly so far. I've found a lot of communities that are interested in the similar things that I am, this being certainly one of them. Um, I was able to show two of my photos at the Plastic Club last October, met several of you in person, and I have a strong passion for exploring the world with my Hasselblad and for printing the negatives that I make in the darkroom. So I'm very involved with the Halide project here in Philly as well. I'm not sure if any of you have heard of it, but I'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end. But they are a community darkroom, and they also support all kinds of alternative photographic processes, and they have a gallery space. So the summer show is opening in July, and uh, definitely encourage everyone to attend if you are able and if you want to. It's a really cool space, and you don't always get to see so much of the alternative traditional photographic processes. So, um, why film? And I think that's a an apt question because I'm 32 years old, and it's not lost on me that I am on the younger side of this Zoom call. And so I think it's a worthwhile question to explore. And um, So it's really interesting because I'm a millennial, born in the early 90s, and so all of the pictures of me as a kid are on film. Um, I grew up going on vacation with my family, and I would, have a little disposable point and shoot and be taking pictures on film myself. That was my first real introduction to photography, and then my grandfather gave me my first digital camera in middle school, and you know, transitioned to that. But I I fell back in love with film in 2019, and there's something about the process that really drew me in. It's not instant gratification. You can't just look at the back of the screen of your camera, and you have to be aware of the cost for every time you release the shutter. With digital. And I don't have anything against digital. I use my iPhone to take photos every single day, right? So it's not about which is better or which is, worse. It's about treating film as a tool, and all of the things that that tool affords me allow me to create the work that I like to create. So all of those limitations are uh, things that pushed people to digital photography for good reasons, but those limitations are the things that make film the perfect tool for me. Um, so that's a little bit about why film, but now the next question is color versus black and white. And we all see the world in color, and color is frequently the most charismatic thing about a scene or an object. And so it's the thing that immediately draws our attention. And I I do tend to keep a roll of color film in my pocket when I'm traveling and when I'm hiking, because sunrises and sunsets, they're too deserving of color. But what I really like doing is exploring the ways in which black and white can reveal more about an image. So take, for example, these two poppy flowers. Um, the one on the right is color. It's some Velvia slide film, and it is nice, right? I My favorite color is yellow, so the yellow is beautiful to me. But that's all I see. When I look at the photo on the left, which is the exact same composition, just, changed the film back from the one that I had loaded with Velvia to some black and white film. To me, the one on the left is the one that is actually interesting to look at for more than a few seconds. I love the way that the striations and the leaves, sorry, the petals are drawn much more prominently to our attention, or to at least mine. And I like the way that you can see the grains of pollen on the stamens there in the center. This is an African daisy, also black and white. And I love the way that you can see the shape of of everything, and it has nothing to do with the color. If you saw the color of this, then that might be all you saw. But there's so much more that black and white reveals. I also really enjoy playing with light. Um, so this is a dahlia flower, and it's a abstract crop, a macro shot of a dahlia flower. And so I think it's interesting because you can tell that it's a flower, but you can't necessarily tell what flower it is. And it's just enough abstracted that, to me, with the way that the light is directionally hitting it, it looks like flames. And when you look at a dahlia flower, in full color, in the entirety of it, you might not be able to see the flames that are made to come alive by this black and white crop. Um, at least I think so. This is an anemone, and again, I think that this was a beautiful blue anemone, but without the color, my eyes are drawn to the center of the flower and to the texture of everything, and I think it's really cool. So my process, it's twofold. I really like hiking with my Hasselblad. So that's a big part of my photography is seeking out these vast, expansive landscapes. Um, but then I also like botanical details, and I think there's so much to explore in the juxtaposition of those two subjects, and they are obviously so related. So then I develop all of my own film. I print it in the darkroom, and I do digitize it. As you can quite obviously see, these are all digital copies, of course. Um, but hiking with my Hasselblad, uh, when most people think about planning a hiking trip, probably a medium format film camera and all of the paraphernalia that goes along with that is not necessarily the first thing that most people think of when they are planning a hiking trip, but it is always the first thing that I think of. The second thing I think of is probably film choices, and the after those essentials, I start thinking about things like a sleeping bag and a tent and food, etc. But I love the reward of hiking to a remote place and uh, trying to capture that and preserve that in a still frame. I love living in cities. The density of living in cities is something that's important to me and that I believe in. And the convenience that comes along with that suits my goals of not owning a car and being surrounded by different and great food options. Um, and I do have to say that sentiment holds true in the context of having the fortunate means to escape the city and spend plenty of my leisure time in remote and mountainous places around the world. But I love being able to take my Hasselblad and explore the world through that waist level viewfinder. This is from a trip to Guatemala. Um, there's a volcano that you can hike the opposite peak and watch it erupt very frequently. And I think on black and white film, the way that the detail of the explosions was captured is absolutely incredible. I showed it earlier on, this is one of my favorite photos that I've ever made, and I have it printed as big as I'm able to print it. Um, and you can see the rocks flying off the side of the eruption. These are some pictures from the Peruvian Andes, pretty far north. It's called the Huayhuash Trek. And this one I did in 2022, and it was about 80 miles, and we were never lower than 14,000 feet. And I absolutely love being at that elevation because uh, the vastness of landscapes that can stretch before you is incredible, and there's no other way to experience something like that. It's another one from Peru. These two are from the Drakensberg Mountains in South Africa. My partner, she's from South Africa originally, and in February of 2024, we spent some time there and went to the Drakensberg Mountains, and they are absolutely stunning. They are a very beautiful shade of green. I have to say that you can't tell that from these photos, but Um, the way that black and white works here for me is how it captures the way that the light is highlighting different parts of the frame. On the leftmost image, um, you have the foreground is in deeper shadow, and the light is kind of coming down that crevice in the middle before tapering off in the background. And then on the right photo, it's highlighting that section right in the center, top center left of the frame. So I also take a lot of macro photos, these botanical details. And I think, like I mentioned, I think it's a pretty neat sandbox of juxtaposition to compare the vastness of a landscape with the closeness of a detailed macro shot. And so I have just a little studio that I set up at home, and I use my Hasselblad. You can see on the right photo, I also use my 4x5 camera. It's a lot easier to do macro with a 4x5 because with the bellows, you can just keep extending and getting closer and closer. With the Hasselblad, I have several extension tubes, um, which work just fine, but it does make it a little bit more difficult. Here's a couple of examples that I made both of these with the Hasselblad and careful directional lighting with a black background. And on the one on the left, the African daisy again, I love how you can see the granules of pollen on the foreground. The one on the right is a ranunculus flower, and I really like the tips of the petals, which have um, a darker color to them as the rest of the petal is rendered in almost white. This is a poppy, absolutely beautiful flower, and I think it works really well. Again, um, being able to see all of the detail beyond the color. This is that same poppy from earlier that I can tell you the color is bright red and the center is bright yellow, but without those present, I see so much more. I also happen to love finding botanical details in botanical gardens and conservatories. These are from the DC Botanic Gardens. Um, it's a absolutely one of my favorite playgrounds for photography. I cannot recommend it enough. Big supporter of the Smithsonian system, of which it is a part of. And here are two more from the same place. I think it's really cool to play with abstraction of things when zooming in. Neither of these show the entire subject, but I think that they're better photos because of that. I think that the more interesting details, and you can appreciate those details more this way than if you saw the entire palm frond. Here on the left is a another dahlia flower, and on the right is image I made in Death Valley. Um, there are, as much as I love to travel, there are so many landscapes here in the US that are so well worth our time, and I have only just begun to scratch the surface out west. So, developing film. Quickly wanted to touch on developing film because it's really important and especially important with black and white film. So I do everything myself, and Rodinal is my developer of choice. So with color film, the process is much more standardized for both color negative and color positive. You have most recently the C41 and the E6 processes, and they're really standard. So you can take any color negative film from any manufacturer, as long as it's shot at the box speed, you can develop it at the same time in the same set of C41 chemicals. But with black and white film, there is so much variety available, and there are dozens of different films still made today, and there are dozens of different developers still made today. And you can go through an infinite rabbit hole of modification to the dilution of the chemicals, to the way that you expose the negatives, and to the time that you spend developing the film. I've tried about everything that's currently available and many things that are no longer available. What I've come to is Rodinal, one of the oldest developers, and it's bulletproof for a reason. I use it at a relatively dilute, a relatively weak dilution of 1 to 50. And the reason I do that, it takes a lot longer to develop film when you use a more dilute concentration of developer. But um, one of the byproducts of that is a more acutance, and so a more defined grain. And it's it's really interesting to me because back when film was king, everyone was searching for less grain and smoother negatives, but I kind of like it the opposite. I like grain, and that's one of the reasons that I shoot film. I think that the organic and random structure of grain um, is still so much better than anything digitally created and digitally applied. Um, I also think that Rodinal is a great developer for making negatives that you print in the darkroom. And that's an important thing because some of the newer developers like Kodak Xtal is a great developer. It's more eco-friendly than Rodinal for sure, but I think Xtal creates negatives that are better for scanning than for printing in the darkroom. And again, that's just based on the way that I print my stuff in the darkroom, but I have always found that the contrast curves with negatives I develop in a dilute Rodinal solution are absolutely beautiful to print. Here's a couple more botanical details, some columbine flowers on the left. I really like the way that uh, the tails of the flower almost make them look like they're flying. And on the right is some more poppies, not the same kind of poppies. The previous one was an Icelandic poppy, or more similar to like a breadseed poppy, and this one is a California poppy, so much more fragile. Here's a couple more from Peru. Um, These were taken on Kodak Triax, and I definitely used a red filter to darken the sky. Here are two more from the US. On the left is one from Death Valley, and on the right is one from a really, really cool formation. It's called the Vermilion Cliffs. So it's called the White Pocket Formation, which is in the Vermilion Cliffs in northern Arizona. That place is like Mars, absolutely incredible, and I desperately need to go back and take more pictures there. Here's two photos again from South Africa. This was in the far northeast of the country, Hluhluwe National Park, and again, of course, took my Hasselblad. So darkroom printing, I absolutely love the process. I think printing is such an important part of photography, And it isn't the goal of all photography, especially today in the digital age. Um, and, for example, I'm not going to print the selfie that I took on my phone and sent to my mom last week, right? That's totally fine for that to live in the digital world. Um, but I do think that the pendulum, so to speak, has swung too far to the extreme, and not enough of us print our photographs. And not just photographs, but not enough of us now appreciate physical art. And I think that physical art is extraordinarily powerful. And so that's, kind of my stump speech about print and about making sure that you are celebrating physical spaces, because I think as much as this platform right now that we are on is an incredible avenue for accessibility and reach, we still have to occupy the physical space. And um, especially the younger generations, my own generation included, I think that's something that we ought to remember more. Um, so here is a darkroom that I used to print at in Boston before I moved to Philadelphia. And there you can see my Dahlia on the right. Now I print everything at the Halide Project. Really accessible if you are in Philly. It's just a couple of blocks from the Berks metro station, the L station. So really accessible, and they have a full suite of darkroom and alternative process equipment on one floor, and the floor above that is a beautiful gallery space. So again, if you are interested in seeing their summer show, I think the opening reception is July 18. So come by. It's open to everyone. Inspiration. So I've just showed you several of my photographs, but I also want to talk about inspiration and photographers who inspire me. So the layup, um, hopefully it comes across in my work. Ansel Adams is a big inspiration of mine. Um, he took so many beautiful landscape pictures on large format and some medium format later as well, but of the American West. And I I think he's an incredibly important figure that we don't think about as much as we maybe ought to. But the way in which his artwork shaped public opinion and, created an environment in which we could make national parks. That is in, you know, in part because of the public perception of natural spaces, and that public perception is shaped by people like Ansel Adams who captured it and shared it with the world. So on the right there is his very famous moonrise shot, and here are two moonrise-esque shots of my own. Both of these are also from Peru, and I didn't have time to put a red filter on, and so the sky is not as dark as I would have liked. But I still think it's a really pretty cool photo. Fan Ho is another person who inspires me a great deal. He's a Chinese photographer born in the 30s and passed away in 2016. Um, his subjects are more commonly in urban settings. He did a lot of work in Hong Kong, and no less, I do think of them as landscape shots. I think from an approach and style, it's a slightly different subjects, but it's the same approach to taking a landscape shot. Um, I I think the way that he used light is absolutely incredible. And you can see in these two photos, there are not really clear markers of time. like you could imagine one of these women in the center photo having an iPhone, and that would make sense. But they also, very obviously didn't. And I think it's beautiful. It creates a really timeless notion, and that's definitely something that I seek to try and do in my work. Some contemporary people, Ben Horn. Is a contemporary current photographer who inspires me a very great deal. He's a large format photographer using 8 by 10 view cameras, and he has a YouTube channel, and that's how I found him. And he focuses on the American West, doing a lot in Death Valley and Zion, but all of his work is on film. He has a massive stockpile of 8 by 10 slide film. So all of his work is on color positive film, and um, a huge source of inspiration for me. Again, he's on YouTube. So if you are interested, he goes into great detail about the compositional choices that he makes, and I think that's a really, really cool resource. So 4 by 5 is the largest format that I've shot. This is a image from just outside Sedona, Arizona. Uh, 4 by 5 is something I'm still trying to wrap my head around. I really like the idea of it, and I really like some of the images I've created, but it is significantly heavier than my Hasselblad and significantly slower. And I like to like you've seen, I like to go hiking in remote parts of the world, and it is more difficult to take a 4 by 5 camera. Not just the camera, but all of the paraphernalia that goes along with it. You have to travel with a dark bag to change film, and you certainly have to have a tripod, of course, but uh, still working on that. This is one that I'm pretty happy with how it came out, though. Another contemporary person that inspires me is Willem Verbeek, another film photographer on YouTube who I follow and really admire. Um, Not only his photography, but the way that he uses videography and his platform to communicate his ideas and his work. Um, in the last year or so, he's also been creating a lot of videos with really journalistic style and their interviews with other photographers. So this is the Photo Society. I figured I'd point him out if you are interested in hearing contemporary photographers who are working photographers that are uh, actively making photographic art, hearing interviews about their process. And again, it's YouTube. It's all totally free. So uh, definitely recommend. Um, the images here are a couple. He's based in Los Angeles, and um, he does a lot of urban landscape style shots that um, they kind of examine the Anthropocene in the sense that the way that humans have changed our surroundings. So you have Ben Horn on the one hand, who is capturing these pristine American landscapes, and then you have Willem, who also on 4 by 5 uh, large format film is capturing the same landscapes, but specifically the way that humans have changed it. I think it's very interesting. So my cameras and lenses. I have more cameras and lenses than I care to admit, spanning every format up, through half frame, 35 millimeter up through 4 by 5 and everything in between. Right. But for Hasselblad, all of the images, except for that one 4 by 5 shot, they have been shot with the Hasselblad 501 CM. It's my go-to camera. I started with a 500 CM, but the 501 is an upgrade while still being completely manual. There's no electronics in it. It does, however, have an improved mirror geometry. That means with longer lenses, you don't get a vignette and able to compose more accurately, which is great because my favorite lens is the 180 sonar. It's kind of similar in field of view to a 100 millimeter on 35 millimeter format or full frame digital format. But I prefer longer lenses for landscapes because the compression lets me pick details more precisely, and it doesn't have an overwhelming amount of foreground or sky. So I have these other three lenses for the V system as well. The 150 sonar, which is the same optical design as the 180. Not quite as good as the 180, but it is significantly more compact, and so it's nice to hike with. I use the 120 macro planar for the macro shots with extension tubes. And then lastly, the 100 millimeter planar. It's a beautifully compact standard lens, kind of similar to a 50 millimeter focal length. Wider than that, there are lenses for the V system that are wider, but I don't know. I've never really found myself drawn to wide focal lengths in any format, but film choices, like I mentioned, I've tried everything currently available and tons of expired stuff. My black and white film of choice is Berger Pancro 400. It's a boutique French film manufacturer that's still making film fresh today. It's a 400 ISO film. And it isn't always the easiest to find, but the contrast curves and the grain structure from being coated with two different uh, kinds of light sensitive emulsions, silver bromide and silver iodide, create a grain structure that I think has a lot of range and it has a really good resolution for the speed, which makes a big difference for uh, my kind of photography. If I can't find Pencro, I still go Tri-X all the way. It's a classic for a reason. I don't very much like the modern T-grain films like T-Max or Kodak T-Max or Ilford Delta. They're very good films, but again, there's something about the traditional cubic grain structure that has a more natural look to me, and I'm not looking for the most precise detail. Like if I wanted that, then I would get one of these 100 megapixel digital cameras, and that's going to far exceed anything I can accomplish with film. In terms of paper, Ilford is the really the big game in town. There are a couple of silver paper manufacturers still making paper, but Ilford is the main one, and Multigrade Art 300. It has kind of like an eggshell sheen to it. Um, Almost feels like watercolor paper, and it's very similar to Hahnemuhl's Platinum Rag in part because Hahnemuhl makes the base for this paper, and I think it's incredible. It's not too glossy or too matte, so you don't lose anything to glare, but it has enough of a sheen that it never feels flat. Okay, so that was a lot about me and my process, and so now I'm just going to take a moment to share where you can find me if you're interested in seeing anything more that I do. I have my own small YouTube channel. Again, YouTube is totally free, and if you're interested in anything I shared today, my videos are all exactly the same. So it's just my name, Ryan Bangdia, and yeah, lots of darkroom, film photography, all kinds of stuff. Instagram, Silver Halide Flowers. That's where you can find me on Instagram. I don't love the platform, but I think it is a very valuable messaging application. So you can find me there. And then my website, silverhalideflowers.com. There are darkroom prints if you are interested. I think they're nice. But then wanted to talk a little bit about the Halide project and just if you are in Philly and you are interested, it's a really great community with a wide range of ages, a lot of young people, but a lot of older people as well. And I think it's so cool that traditional, analog photography can bring everyone together in that way. And like I said, they have a fantastic darkroom setup, a lot of alternative process stations for, you know, cyanotypes, platinum, palladium. They have a big UV uh, printer, UV box for printing platinum, palladium. And they even have a printer that we just set up actually to print digital negatives on transparency film. And so if you have a digital image, you can print it as a negative on that transparency film and use that to make a platinum palladium print, which I think is really cool. So just to plug that. Current fascinations for me, infrared film. I think it's really cool. I've been playing with it for a while, but definitely have more things that I want to experiment with it. So uh, can get really far into the details, but basically, infrared is at the end of the spectrum that we can't see, but some films can see. And so I put a filter in front of the lens that blocks all the visible light and lets in everything above 720 nanometers, and the film can see about up to 810 nanometers. And so I have to increase the exposure significantly, about 5 stops of exposure, but it makes green foliage light up bright white. And the whole reason that infrared film was used in the first place is actually because of in the World War II era, they used it to uh, find inorganic objects, right? So you can see on the right side, that image is with a infrared film and an infrared filter, and the foliage looks bright white because the chlorophyll reflects infrared light. And so it increases the exposure locally and looks bright white. But tanks and, military fatigues, even if they look green and blend in, are well camouflaged in the forest, they don't reflect infrared light. And so you could use that to, you know, take pictures from an airplane high above and see troop movements. But that's less why I'm interested in it. I'm more interested in it from an artistic perspective and seeing uh, what I can do with it. But in this example, the sky is not jet black, which generally is a result, but that's because of the position of the sun. So I do want to experiment more with it because I do like when you can make the skies dark black. I think when you have clouds also they pop out against that and it's pretty cool. But anyway, that's what I've got. Hope you enjoyed. would love to answer any questions if anyone has any or stories to share.
All right, I'll be brave. I'll go first on the question.
Okay, go ahead.
Um, you mentioned, and I'm just curious. I know with my digital camera, going from black and white to color, I can shoot color and convert it to black and white, and then, you know, Photoshop, or post processing. You mentioned there's a way you can switch film back so you can, and your Hasselblad. I'm not familiar with that. I mean, is there like your film goes into a thing that attaches to the back of the camera and you can switch it? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, so consumer 35 millimeter cameras, you put one film in and you have to shoot it until you're finished with that film, and you can't shoot any other kind of film. But a lot of the medium format systems back in the day had film backs that you could remove, and you could have dozens of film backs if you so desired, and each one of them could have a different film in it. Um, and you can keep the camera set on a tripod, just unclip the film back and plug your other film back on and take the exact frame. Also means that you don't have to shoot all 12 images on a roll of medium format film.
That's
Uh,
another question. How many images you typically get on a roll of film?
yeah, totally different from every kind of format. So in 35 millimeter,
36, 24.
regular, you know, 24 by 36 frames, you get 36 images to a typical roll. Sometimes they sell 24 frame rolls that are a little bit cheaper, but 36 is generally the standard for 35 millimeter. For medium format, it depends on what aspect ratio of a photo you're taking. The common ones are 645, which is 6 centimeters by 4.5 centimeters. And in that case, you would get 16 images. That's kind of the smallest aspect ratio in medium format. And then you jump up to 6 by 6, which is what the Hasselblad shoots, and that's 12 images. And then 6 by 7 was another very common format, and that's 10 images. And I think they go up to 6 by 12 backs. Um, but sometimes you need large format lenses to have enough big enough image circle for that. And so that, you know, 6 by 12, you got four shots on a single roll, but um, totally depends on the format. And then large format, you're shooting individual sheets, and so that's one and done.
So,
Ryan, David Rodstein made some comments. David, would you like to just repeat your comments in person?
Okay. I put them with one is that I got married 2 years ago and we hired a professional. Of course, I couldn't photograph and get married at the same time, but during the social hour, I converted all the pictures to black and white. And without the color distraction, I could see how the people were interacting and who was interacting with who was comfortable, who wasn't, who was happy, who was laughing. All the emotions come through that the color would distract from. And you mentioned the Ilford film. I used to like to use Portriga for the sepia. Do you have any thoughts on Portriga? And do they still make it? That film.
So to your first point, yeah, I completely agree. I think, you know, when you take away the color, like you're not looking at people's shirts, you're looking at their expressions, and you can tell so much from people's expressions, especially in photographs when they're frozen. Um, Portriga, I don't, I'm not familiar with that. I know Kodak makes Kodak Portra, which is a color negative line of film. What kind of film
Portriga
was?
was a paper. It was actually a paper. I'm sorry, it was a paper that
Okay.
had a sepia tone to it. And Ilford was cool. Portriga was warm.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'm not familiar with that being made currently. Ilford and others, they do make both warm tone and cool tone papers. So you can get a warm tone paper from Ilford. But a lot of the modern papers, the multigrade papers, you're less locked into contrast grade and a tone.